We now go deeper in the analysis of the situation experienced in Palestine. We welcome Manolo de Los Santos, Co-Executive Director of the People's Forum and researcher at Tri-Continental Institute for Social Research. Welcome, Manolo.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join teleSUR.
No, it's our pleasure to have you here on our From the South. Manolo, we have been receiving the reports. Hundreds have died on both sides in this latest escalation of violence. What has prompted this? What has led Palestinians to this moment?
Well, I think it's a common media lie that has been spread across the global north, and particularly in the United States and Europe, that this is a conflict that started 48 hours ago or 72 hours ago on Saturday. But this is a conflict that has been decades in the making and that truly has its origins in the imposed creation of the State of Israel 75 years ago. This conflict has true responsibility in the fact that Britain, the US, and their allies essentially artificially impose the State of Israel on the Palestinian people and have since been using everything at their disposal: military aid, financial aid, legal, political, and diplomatic support to justify by all means extreme forms of violence against the Palestinian people and the removal of the Palestinians from their homeland. That is the source of this conflict. To talk only about hundreds of victims in the last 3 days is not just incorrect, but is unfair with the historical facts.
That dates back decades, and for years the so-called international community has been silent on the Palestinian issue. Israel's main ally is the US. How can we explain the US position and the Western world in general when they were so quick in imposing the largest number of sanctions against Russia, for example, on Ukraine, yet they stand idle by when for decades Israel has continued its oppression of the Palestinian people?
Well, for the United States government, as always, it doesn't care about top themes like democracy. It doesn't care about sovereignty. It doesn't care about independence. What it does care about is essentially maintaining at all cost, well, at the cost of 3.8 billion US dollars a year of taxpayer money, maintaining a regime in Israel whose sole role is essentially to be the guard dog, the watchdog for US imperialism in West Asia and in the Middle East. This is the role that Israel has been assigned and for which it keeps getting funded fundamentally. And I think that it's worrisome that at this time of continued and extreme cruel violence against the Palestinian people, the headlines continue to be that the terrorists invaded Israel, when the headlines should really be saying Israelis have invaded the Palestinian homeland for 75 years and are now finally being resisted. I think it's important to note that what happened on Saturday, what has been happening for the last few days, is the act of 2.3 million people imprisoned in Gaza under a blockade who are finally fighting and pushing for their freedom. We must respect that, and we should defend their right to resist in these circumstances.
In the last couple of days, we have seen citizens in different parts of the world take to the streets by the thousands to support the Palestinian cause. How important is this international support from people to people?
Well, I think it's extremely important because, again, when we look at media in the US and in Europe, it would make you think that the whole world sides with Israel, that the whole world is accepting the occupation, is accepting the system of apartheid, accepting the violent oppression of the Palestinian people. But by going out into the streets, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people across the world, in cities ranging from New York all the way to Sydney in Australia, are demonstrating that, in fact, the peoples of the world, even in these countries that are so aligned with the Israeli regime, are in fact in support of the Palestinian people. And that supporting the Palestinian people right now means not just a mere act of solidarity, but to be hand in hand with them as they struggle for their national liberation. By the fact that we are saying that there can be no peace in the conflict that takes place in the region if the Palestinian people are not allowed finally to return home by the millions, if they're not allowed to fully build a national state, a homeland for their people.
Manolo, in your view, what role can alternative blocs in the international arena play or are currently playing to find a true solution to this situation? Just yesterday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pledged humanitarian aid for Palestine. Can we expect other nations also to join in?
Well, I think it's been quite important to see that, again, countries like Cuba, countries like Venezuela, countries like Bolivia, and many other leaders across the world have actually stood up and said the truth about this conflict. Again, that is, the weight is on the leadership of the world. The weight is on the United Nations. The weight is on those who have ignored the plight of the Palestinian people for the last 75 years. And I think that their statements calling for both the access to humanitarian aid, their calls denouncing the total blockade announced by Israel against the people of Gaza are important, but they should be continued. And we continue to have the need for more and more voices across the planet in government that are willing to take this stand. The courageous stand that countries like Cuba and Venezuela take shouldn't be the exception. They should be the majority of leaders around the world finally taking the side of justice.
Thank you, Manolo, for your statements and time here for From the South.